Thanks very much. I'm delighted to see so many people here today. I've skipped the disclaimer already. All companies have a vision, and we all sit around and talk about where it is we want to go and what we want to do and how we're going to do it. I would like to talk about two parts of our vision, and certainly in the sense that some of the things that Rob have just said has also struck a bit of a chord with me. We'll be focusing very much on lithium exploration in Namibia. We've got a raft of projects over there. I won't really be talking about those today because we're about to start drilling tomorrow on our Portugal copper project, and I'm really going to focus on that today. And then secondly, and again, which reflects back to what Rob was just saying, there's a lot of companies not actually spending real exploration money out there, and I don't think you'll be able to accuse us of that over the next year. We certainly have some serious exploration planned. The board, I don't want to focus too much on the board except to say that we've all been around for a long time, and we've got a really well-experienced technical team who are all resident in the countries where we're working. I haven't added the Portugal team here yet because we've only recruited them in the last few weeks, and we're just bedding that project down now, but we have a permanent team in Namibia, and then we have specialist people that largely reside in Australia and head backwards and forwards to the projects as required. And again, some things that Rob have just reflected on that I think come out very beautifully here. Average of 600 million shares across all those companies. Well, even fully diluted, we only have 116 million. Okay, so there's not a lot of paper out here. So that's a great start for us. And then here's an even greater start. We've got over $8 million in the bank at the moment, and as of tomorrow, we'll be really starting to explore seriously. So the one thing that we do have, the company has been inactive for some time. We sold a gold project in Mozambique in 2015. That's where the money come from that is in the bank now. But there hasn't been a lot of news flow in the past. We've been out searching the world looking for projects, and that's about to change. Our focus will be very much initially on lithium and copper. Lithium, everyone knows why we want to be in lithium. You hear it, there's a lot of companies here talking about lithium, and that's very obvious. Copper, perhaps not so obvious, but we feel that copper is a really important infrastructure addition to the renewable energy thing, and there's an enormous amount of copper that need to go in the electric vehicles that are being planned and mandated throughout Europe and in North America. There's a lot of copper that goes into the wind farms, the solar stations, everything else. So we feel copper's day is certainly coming, and that's where we've focused on at the moment. We are also, like everyone else, looking for a cobalt project, but they're not easy to find. So what are we going to look for, and what are we doing in Portugal? I think I'm going to spend 1 minute here talking about a little bit of geology for those of you who are not technical, but it's very difficult to find something if you don't know what you're looking for. So we've focused very carefully on a particular target style. This is called VMS deposits, volcanic massive sulfides. They occur on the sea floor. They occur right throughout geological time. There's Archean examples. There's examples here in Portugal that are 450 million years old. There's modern examples forming on the sea floor now off the coast of New Guinea that are being mined or were being mined by Nautilus. I'm not sure of the status. This is super hot water coming out of the sea floor, okay? And it's black because it's full of sulphur and it's full of metal, and that water mixes with a very cold seawater and it falls straight down. And we deposit a giant mound of sulphide on the sea floor. Consequently, that gets covered by younger sediments, and then really what we're doing is exploring for those positions. This is a sort of cartoon cross-section. You can target the massive sulphides, but you might also find what can be an economically important zone underneath that, what's called the stringer zone, which is a zone of disseminated and vein-type sulphides. So these deposits are multi-metallic. They can have copper, zinc, lead, silver, gold, tin. And the good thing about them, they're not huge. They're not like porphyry coppers. They're not billions of tonnes. But they're very high grade typically. So some of the great examples that you will know from Australia, Rosebery, Halia, deposits in Scuddles and Gossan Hill in Western Australia. So well known. So where do you go and look for VMS? Well, when you look on a worldwide distribution, there's some obvious places to look, and you can see the Australian examples here, a lot in Tassie, but there's one belt that contains a lot of the world's VMS mineralisation. And so that's the place that we decided technically to go and look for some targets. And, you know, I refer back here now to a 1970s show, and I look around at the age of the audience. I'm sure you'll all be familiar, the land of the giants. Well, we wanted to go and explore in the land of the giant mines, okay? And I believe it's the Iberian Pyrite Belt. It's a belt of rocks that transect the Portugal-Spanish border, and it's really the purple rocks which represent the ancient sea floor that are prospective stratigraphy here. And it's you know, in geology we love to classify things. So in VMS knowledge, a deposit greater than 100 million tonnes contain ores is a giant, and a deposit greater than 200 million tonnes is a supergiant. And this belt has 18 giants and 3 supergiants. Rio Tinto, the company which you all know, was formed in 1890 to go and mine at Rio Tinto in Spain. It's still being mined now. It was mined by the Romans. I was telling my wife, I've got a new wife recently, so congratulations to me. And she's not from the mining industry. And I said to her, you know, they've been mining since Roman times, and she said, shit, isn't it all gone? Well, no, of course it's not all gone, because they couldn't get below the water table. And really, modern exploration is about the third dimension. Okay, it's what's occurring underground now. What are the deep targets? The easy stuff's been found, so we've got to be smart and we've got to use. And that's one of the reasons why we like VMS. They have a really strong geophysical signature. Okay, because there's so much metal in them that they locally affect the Earth's gravity field. That means if you hit a 7 iron on top of Neves Corvo, it won't go as far as if you hit a 7 iron here. The Earth's gravity is sucking that ball down because the ore body weighs so much. It means that if you pump electricity into the ground, you can see where that current goes, and that's called EM, and that's another exploration target. And we can also use magnetics to help us find these things. So what are we really looking for here? So this is Neves Corvo. It's not our mine, it's Lundin. It's a $5 billion market cap. It's one of the great VMS deposits, over 200 million tonnes in resource, I think over 50 million tonnes in reserve at the moment. This is one of the early sections. It was discovered in 1977 in the second drill hole, based on a gravity anomaly. It's a big ore deposit, okay? It sucks you down when you walk on it. So, not much, you don't really feel it, but, you know, theoretically. We can certainly measure it, okay? We can certainly measure it with our instrumentation, but look at some of these hits that they had in the early days. Amazing thicknesses and grades of copper and zinc, later tin, silver. This is one of the world's great ore bodies. And so what happens if a junior finds an ore deposit like this? Okay, and here are 2 examples that you will all know. And this is why, I'll tell you now, this is why everyone here comes to these conferences. Not to get a 5% dividend from BHP. Who cares? Whatever they pay. You come to find one of these. You come to find a junior who's got the guts to go out and explore and make one of these discoveries. Because when you do, you get a 10, 20, 50 bagger. All right? That's why you're here today, to find a company like this who's exploring for these style of deposits. Go and talk to Mark at Sirius, and you know who was the MD. They're here, S2 now, the reincarnation. They're exploring for the same style of deposit in Finland, I believe now, certainly up in the Arctic Circle somewhere. And, you know, they know what value there are in these deposits. So we would argue that this is a very valid target, and if we're successful, you'll be well rewarded as a shareholder. Just focusing in on some detail now. It's an enormous licence for a variety of historical reasons. It has barely been explored. There's only ever been 4 holes drilled in the 600 square kilometres, and they were all drilled back in the 80s and early 90s. Neves Corvo itself, the Lundin giant mine, 20 kilometres from our lease, was discovered in 1977 on the back of a gravity anomaly, and it was intersected in the second hole that they drilled, and it's an enormous deposit. And we can trace that geology straight down what's called the Neves Corvo trend. It occurs at the top of an antiform, a fold, and we can trace that geology straight down, and we've got 22 geophysical targets that I believe are worth drill testing. Okay, now we can't test them all at once, but we're starting, and we're starting drilling tomorrow. I announced last week that we'd be starting next week, but we've managed to get on site early. The pads are prepared, and the rig should be turning tomorrow. Now, our targets are deep. The top of the target, anywhere from 5 to 700 metres deep, a range of targets. okay? But we've got massive magnetic anomalies, massive gravity anomalies, massive EM anomalies. Importantly, we also have some oxide copper deposits. They're only small and they're of no real economic interest, but you can also see one here in the footwall of the Neves-Corvo deposit. That's documented leakage up younger structures, so young faults that post-date the mineralisation here. So we formed the mineralisation, we've covered it with other sediments, and then as Africa crashes in to Europe and it folds everything, we get deformation and we get younger faults, and those younger faults pump water up and down them. That's really what faults do, that's how they operate. And some of that copper from deep down at Neves-Corvo has been sucked up and taken to the surface, and it's formed an oxide copper deposit. There are 3 of those on our ground, and what I believe that they're potentially leakage from copper deeper in the system, and that's what we're exploring for. So we've got EM anomalies, we've got magnetic anomalies, we've got gravity anomalies, and we've got oxide copper at the surface. I think this is a fantastic exploration play. So what are we actually doing? Oh, sorry, who else is there? There's been 80 mines mined in the history of the Iberian Pyrite Belt. These are some of the bigger ones that are currently active. One of the important things too that I noticed as I was compiling and doing my research to do this project is that the vast majority of the deposits are actually in Spain, and there's very few in Portugal. Now, 450 million years ago when these deposits formed, no one knew where the boundary between Spain and Portugal was going to be. That's a nonsense, right? Geology doesn't know about stuff like that. Politicians, impediments to work stop people exploring in Portugal, but that's no longer the case. Portugal has opened up in the last few years. Oz Minerals did a big JV there last week, announced to look for iron oxide copper gold deposits further north, not in the belt itself. But Portugal is now a good place to go and work, and I think you'll see Australian juniors going into that market. And I think because of that, and as Rob pointed out, if you're not spending, you're not finding. So as the spend goes up, the discoveries will go up. So we've got 22 coincident targets. We're about to start drilling. Phase 1 will test 3 of those targets. We'll probe every one of them with downhole geophysics to ensure that our targeting continues to improve. These are deep targets. Our holes, as I say, the targets are anywhere between 700 and 1,000 metres deep, so our holes are budgeted to around 1,000 metres. The drill rig will be on site today and should start turning tomorrow. I was going to tell you about Portugal, and you know, I haven't even been there yet. I've just read about the geology. I've done a lot of research on it. I'm going very shortly, but there's no, you know, I've got a couple of weeks before the drill hole reaches its target depth, which is when I want to be there. And as the video that you saw at the start, that excellent video with the Foo Fighters, reminded me of the places that I've lived and worked 30 years in exploration all over the world. There's my Uber in Botswana. The guys in PNG, always happy to see me. Camps that I've lived in the Tanami, you know, not places that you usually want to take investors, okay? But I'm telling you now, invest in our company, become a shareholder, take a tax deduction, come to Portugal, have a glass of port with me. We'd be delighted to see you. I promise you'll have more fun than if you go out in the outback of Australia. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll consider this seriously. It's a great company. We're exploring actively. I've got a whole other lithium project in Namibia that I didn't get time to talk about today. We hope to be drilling there within the next couple of months as well. And we're on the lookout for new stuff. Thank you very much for your time, and thanks for coming out so early.